All right, we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar on the Datavant Switchboard. My name is Joyce Lee. I'm on the product marketing team here at Datavant. In the next hour or so, we're going to walk through an overview of what Datavant Switchboard is, what the components are, and how they can be put to use. So our goal today is to ensure that you all are aware of how to fully take advantage of working with Datavant and have more tools in your toolkit to make it easier for you to connect and exchange data across your organization and with your data partners. So one quick logistical note before we dive into the content. You can feel free to send in any questions you have throughout the session in the Zoom Q&A function there at the bottom of your screen. We might go through some of the questions live during the presentation, and we'll also have dedicated time for questions at the end. So feel free to submit those questions at any time, and we can go ahead and get started. So the agenda today, pretty straightforward. We'll introduce Datavant Switchboard, walk through some of the challenges working with health data today, and in particular, some of the complexities that arise because of the fragmented state of health data today in the industry. And we do have the Datavant product team joining us today. They're the product experts on the various components of Switchboard. And we'll run through some of the real world use cases to kind of see the product in action. So I'll be turning it over first to Mark, our head of product management, to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Joyce. Hi, everyone. Thank you for spending time out of your busy days to be here with us. As Joyce said, I'm Mark. I head up the product management function. I'll start by introducing our very friendly presenters for the day. We have Christian here, who leads our ecosystem and overlap tool, Salma, who leads our data pipelines and related products, and Serena, who oversees our certification and compliance products. So we'll get to hear from them in about 10 minutes when we get to the Switchboard component deep dive and we walk through each one of the capabilities. This group here has a collective roughly decade of experience here at Datavant building these products, which given our age means that we have a pretty good view on the history and trajectory of what's happened here. So let's get started with Datavant Switchboard. Okay, Datavant's mission has always been focused on connecting health data across organizations, and we've invested in making sure that we can support you all in removing friction from the process of finding and exchanging data. I think many of you know Datavant and potentially even Universal Patient Key or UPK, for those who've been with us for many, many years, as a tokenization company at our core. And tokenization is an important step to safely connecting and exchanging patient-level data, while also ensuring that each organization stays in control of what happens with their data. But as most of you here today are aware, tokenization is not the only step in the process of exchanging and connecting data. Connecting health data in a way that's secure, compliant, and efficient for both parties, and takes into account of the needs and desires of where data lives and how the partnership gets formed, can get a little complicated and things can slow down. So over the last few years, we've supported dozens and now hundreds of bespoke data flows for our customers, where tokenization is one of the pieces of that puzzle. And there may have been other challenges like evaluating the overlap between two data sets to figure out, are there the right patients in common before performing a linkage or before exchanging data, or a need to certify an individual data set, a need to assess the risk presented by joining two different data sets. And those sort of things complicate the workflows a little bit. And so what we've done with Switchboard is to productize each of these components. So what you're looking at here on the page is the different components, as we call them, of the overall Switchboard product. And the goal of these is to make the process of finding partners, bringing data into your organization, or safely sending data out easy. And that's pretty much it. We want to make sure that all our customers and partners can take advantage of this to make the entire end-to-end process of finding data partners simple. And so you may already be familiar with some of the core pieces of Switchboard, the ability to tokenize and overlap, for example. But by using the full set of components that we have listed here, we think there's an opportunity to increase revenues by identifying and validating new partners quickly. So going from many months to form a partnership, driving that down to weeks or even days, to reduce the amount of time and effort that your technical teams or your IT teams have to spend responding to needs to assess data cuts, create the right cohorts, send the data out, validate that all the right redactions have been applied, and finally to manage your risk and compliance to ensure that your data sets when joined with other data sets meet the HIPAA threshold of compliance. And finally, that all the right downstream controls on what will happen with your data once it gets sent out on a token, that all those controls are in place. So that's the Datavant Switchboard. It's a set of technology components that serves as infrastructure to enable organizations like yourselves to safely connect data. Now, to be clear, this stuff is live. We announced it a month or two ago. We have written tens of thousands of lines of code over the last year or so. We have 1,000+ data sets live in the system, uploaded by a range of hundreds of organizations. We have 50 billion+ records that have been ingested. So there's a lot of scale in what Switchboard can do in getting data in and getting that data segmented and delivered to the right location. Okay. So let's turn to challenges in connecting health data. So this is just going to kind of set the scene for what Datavant's trying to do overall, and then we'll get into the deep dive on each of the product components. So first, we're super excited to be working on what we see as one of the major problems of the century, and we include all of our customers and partners with us on this mission. So the decisions that you're making or you're informing with your data and analytics have extremely high stakes, maybe the highest of any industry, because at the end of the day, patients' lives and their care depend on them. The opportunity here is creating a healthcare system where patient data is being used smartly and securely to improve our understanding of disease, treatments, behaviors, effectiveness, adherence, which providers patients see, and more. And so ultimately, we're trying to create a system and a set of data that better serves patients. Now, one of the challenges is that this explosion of data is happening across an increasingly fragmented landscape. And on the page here, you can see different types of data. And within those different types of data, there are many organizations that have important different pieces of the puzzle. And so for a researcher, whether you're an academic, you're in commercial pharma, you're a healthcare analytics partner, you know that getting access to a complete set of data for a particular set of patients is often one of the core challenges of the problem. Not even necessarily the computation, but just do I have the full picture on this particular patient population? So solving this problem of data connectivity across organizations is our mission at Datavant. And our role is being neutral, trusted, ubiquitous party. So that's a mouthful there. But what we mean by that is we want you to see us as the company that's laying the infrastructure that you can use to do the hard work that you're doing to make sense of health data and ultimately enable the use cases. So we want to be laying the roads, so to speak, that you all will travel over. We're really trying to be the infrastructure to enable the connectivity. And so we made some progress today. You can see on the page here some of the stats around the size of the ecosystem. And we're a couple months now post merger with Ciox. Ciox works directly with over 40% of US hospitals. They work with thousands of other clinics. And we're now in the process of speaking with some of those organizations to bring them into the ecosystem and enhance today's ecosystem with additional rich clinical data. And ultimately, we aim to be the infrastructure that powers health data connectivity, both in the de-identified world and with Ciox now in the identified world, and have those two organizations covering both sides of the equation. Okay. As we've worked with organizations who are running projects to connect data, we've seen some of the challenges that they run into. And some of these points may look familiar to you. They may even look obvious as challenges that you run into and you and your teams work through every day, which is, will a partner have the right data set, the right patients? Will they be willing to even license the data out? What match rates will I get? How will the data get delivered? What redactions are going to be put in place? Will that maintain the right utility? All of those questions come up when you're trying to find and actually execute these partnerships. And that's why we typically see partnerships taking many, many months to come to fruition. And again, our goal is to be able to create a set of technology that drives that down. Okay, so let's jump on to the next slide. Those challenges bring us back to Datavant Switchboard. So you're looking at a mock-up here of a UI that's showing the switchboard in action. So for a particular organization, if you log into the Datavant portal, and hopefully those of you who are on the call right now have access to the Datavant portal. If you log in, you'll see a new homepage that went live about 2 months ago. And that homepage will show you what's happening. It's sort of a visualization of what's happening in your switchboard, who you're receiving data from, who you're sending data out to. And then, of course, a lot of the important work is not the visualization. It's the work that we've done under the hood to actually make it possible to certify and distribute and do other things with that data. Okay, let's jump on to the next slide. So we're almost ready to go into the deep dive, but I just want to make one last point, and sort of more of a philosophical point. We think of Datavant Switchboard as being your switchboard, and it's your tool that you can use in workflows with your partners in the way that works for you and for them. So we're an infrastructure and technology vendor to you, not an intermediary or a data company. And we think this is true when you are using Switchboard to route your data to or from your partners, whether or not the data is flowing through us or not. Ultimately, it's your data strategy, it's your data asset, and you're making the decisions as to how you use these tools. Okay, and so now we will jump on to Switchboard Deep Dive. We'll spend a couple minutes running through each one of the major components, and we will start with the most fundamental and likely the most familiar, which is our tokenization. So let's jump on here. So tokenization ensures that you can link records at the individual level and get a longitudinal view of each patient within your organization and connecting that data in a de-identified manner to other organizations' data and protecting patient privacy. Now, I won't spend too much time on this because I think this is probably the most familiar piece for this audience. So our tokenization engine is something that you're likely familiar with. You already know, hopefully appreciate. If you don't appreciate it, we'd love to hear from you. We'd appreciate feedback on how it could be easier to work with our tokenization software. And what the tokenization engine does is it de-identifies and creates tokens from the PII in your data set, or the personally identifiable information in your data set. And if we jump onto the next slide, we'll show some examples of the ways that PII gets redacted. So let's jump on here. Perfect. Okay, so on this page, what you can see is a very simple example where you have a patient individual record, some identifying information, and some configuration is done to say what should happen to that data. And the output is an adjusted, de-identified record. And in addition, a token has been created for this patient, Noah Sullivan. You can see the full form of the token on the bottom there. Now, in practice, multiple tokens will be created as part of this tokenization process. And that's really important because what that means is that, first of all, Datavant's tokenization is able to tokenize all records because we have a wide variety of PII that can be fed in and used. We're able to help match records even when there are gaps in the PII, or even when two partners don't have the same PII. And we're able to ensure a very high quality match by creating a range of tokens so that we can get down into, well, are these two records actually the same individual based on what does or does not match? And so you can have flexibility and control over how you do those matches. We'll talk a little bit more about matching later on. In terms of using the software, what you're looking at here is a screenshot of our configuration tool. So a couple months ago, we added this tab on the portal. So if you go in, you'll see a certification, or you see, a configuration tab. And in here, you can set up the software and you can create multiple configurations, and the software can then be configured to read in different data sets, apply different rules, write different data out, and create different tokens. So if you have multiple data sets, you set up different configurations and you're ready to go. And so that's a screenshot of what you're looking at here. Now, we'll jump on to the next slide. In terms of how you work with the tokenization software, there's a few different methods. The first one here is the most common, which is command line. So you can install our executable software, you can run it from the command line, you can script it, and it will process your data sets sort of on command there. So that's the most common way. Recently, we updated this piece of software to combine both tokenization as well as the transformation of tokens when sending and receiving data into one piece of software. So we're trying to make that simpler. So you can install one lightweight executable, and that can do all of your tokenization from the command line. We also have a desktop version. So if you have folks that aren't familiar or uncomfortable working with the command line, and you don't need automation, we have a desktop UI where you can actually drag and drop. You can work with files right through a Windows-based interface. We also offer server mode. So for those of you that are building processes that are requiring real-time data tokenization, server mode is great. You can run it on a local server, and then you can interface with that as if it was a RESTful API. You can send in a record and get that tokenized or get that linked. And then the last method for tokenization is don't install the software, let us do the tokenization. And so if you're in a situation where for whatever reason, your organization isn't comfortable installing software and you want to send identified data to us, we have a secure separate environment to host identified data, do the tokenization, and then we can distribute that tokenized data back to you or onto a partner. So number of different ways to get started with the sort of core tokenization component here. Okay, so that's tokenization, and at long last, I will pause and I will actually pass this on to Chris, who will talk us through the ecosystem overlap tool. So Chris, thank you for being here, and take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. Here I will provide an overview of how you can best utilize our Explore and Overlap tools to make your data more discoverable and easier to connect. So moving on to our Explore page. Our Explore page allows partners to manage and list their company profile and discover other partners within the Datavant ecosystem. So as a source or data provider, you can manage your company profile to showcase what data types your organization specializes in and list the data sets and their underlying metadata that you have uploaded to our portal. And as someone looking to purchase data, you can search and filter for specific types of data or companies, and then request an introduction to the data source that best fits your needs. So far, hundreds of introductions have been made every year through the Explore page, and we've built it to ensure that you maintain full control of who gets to view your company profile and who can reach out to you. And right now we're working on a new feature on the horizon that will give customers the ability to post a data inquiry, essentially like putting a classified ad in a newspaper to let other members of the Datavant ecosystem know what type of data you are looking to purchase. Data sources will then be able to view and respond to these types of inquiries. And overall, we hope this can enable data to flow a little bit more easily across the ecosystem. Next, I will chat about overlaps. So this is one of our most widely utilized and important tools for discovery, which some of you may already be very familiar with. So here you can quickly evaluate where and to what extent your patient cohorts overlap with other data sets in the Datavant ecosystem without actually having to exchange data. And to date, over 300 million patient lives across over 1,000 data sets belonging to over 100 organizations have been overlapped using this tool. For sources specifically, potential buyers can quickly assess the overlap between their own data and yours, thereby reducing the back and forth required for data diligence and accelerating the path to partnership. Further accelerate this process by enabling your data sets as on demand, which will allow partners not on your blacklist to immediately run an overlap on your data set on demand. For buyers, data sets that have been turned on as on demand will enable you to run overlaps in real time. No back and forth, waiting for approvals, waiting for technical teams to pull specific data cuts, etc., are necessary. In addition, we have recently released a few new features enabling users with the ability to generate overlaps on up to 3 data sets at a time on the portal experience, and to generate an overlap on 2 or more third-party, which are non-owned data sets. Upcoming features include, as I mentioned, data inquiries, which will allow buyers to post their data inquiries. So that takes us through Explore and Overlap tools. Next, Selma will talk us through our match capabilities.
Thanks, Chris. With Datavant Match, you can connect disparate data at the patient level with best-in-class matching of patient records across organizations. Matching is not a one-size-fits-all approach. All of us know this, and there is a natural trade-off between precision and recall. We recognized how important that flexibility is in designing our matching solution. There are 3 ways to match records. One is to use token-based matching, which has the benefit of being simple. A second is to apply a token-based algorithm whereby you can customize logic, based on your data set's available tokens. And the third method, and the one that we're going to cover briefly today, is utilizing a statistical model that uses other data sets to predict and further improve the accuracy of a match. We very recently launched this new offering as part of the Datavant Switchboard to offer a simple approach that optimizes logic based on available tokens and has been trained using comprehensive real-world data. So talking through an example, there are 3 instances on this slide of Stephen Lane. with different zip codes, different name spellings, as you can see. Datavant with Datavant Match is able to recognize that these records are indeed the same patient and assign them a single Datavant ID. What's really great about this new match offering is that it not only introduces a more sophisticated level of matching, but it's really a simple turnkey experience to use. So rather than needing to determine a match logic for each new combination of data sets, you can assign a single consistent ID for all of the data that you're matching across your organization based off of a model that's already been optimized for the best possible match. Datavant IDs are applied as part of the switchboard experience as you distribute your data through Datavant, so there's very little additional effort required on your part. And since you don't need to share any PHI with us, the IDs are unique to your organization, your data stays safe. Datavant can be used to achieve over 99.5% precision and recall with full patient information. Now my colleague Serena will talk about certification.
Thanks, Salma. So we know whenever you're linking data together, you need to ensure the data is compliant with HIPAA, and often that means making sure that it's legally considered de-identified. The process of getting a HIPAA expert determination is often time intensive, like it can take you months to do, and expensive. Datavant Switchboard can now manage and execute many of the steps involved in certification on your behalf. With our technology, we can enable a shorter turnaround time and as well as best-in-class privacy practices, so you can make sure that your patient privacy is being protected. To get started using our platform, all you have to do is upload your data as well as a data dictionary, and then we'll take it from there. First, an expert determination is produced. We'll work with a certifier of your choice, or we can bring in a certifier if you don't have one that you already work with, and they'll assess the data and produce a certification outlining the redactions needed to ensure that there's a low risk of patient re-identification. In traditional certification, this is where the process ends, but we know that the bulk of the work is often applying that certification to your data set, which means redacting the data in a number of different ways. For example, taking a 5-digit zip code and making it 3 digits, to use a simple example. And so Datavant actually does that work of applying the redactions to the data set to make sure it aligns to the certification to create a legally HIPAA de-identified data set. In addition to that, we'll run a variety of validation checks to ensure that there's no identifiable data inadvertently being passed through. And then the data is ready for you to use. It's also important to note that this certification offering makes it really easy to work with different partners to connect multiple data sets together. We make it easy to have by having one neutral and secure location for you and your partner to upload your data sets to, and where that certification will occur. We also, like Salma mentioned before, will enable matching as well as segmenting and distribution for you so that you can immediately start analyzing the data or have your partner immediately start analyzing the data. So in summary, Datavant offers managed certification to enable fast certification as well as have a neutral platform where you can easily work with your other data partners. I'll now pass it back to Salma, who will talk more about distribution.
Thanks, Serena. As Serena mentioned, I'll be rounding out talking about the different switchboard components by explaining data distribution, which really enables you to scale delivery of data in the ecosystem. Datavant distribution, it's simple, it ensures data integrity and integrates seamlessly into overlaps, matching, and certification, as was talked about. By using distribution, your setup cost is really drastically reduced, because we allow you to onboard data one time or in an automated feed if you prefer to a single location across multiple recipients. So you don't have to figure out anymore how your different data recipients want to receive data in and set up the feeds between them and vice versa for data recipients and sources. Our system also has built-in validations to detect any anomalous data and to allow our data sources to take actions to correct that data. So this really reduces the risk of sending customers sensitive data downstream. And operationally, like I said, this is a lot less work for you and for your customers who are licensing data. With distribution, you can also build and deliver custom segments which enables you to flexibly and easily solve the needs of multiple data recipients. So you can have an underlying data set and segment it out based off of different criteria, and then set it up to deliver to different recipients based off of their preferences. Distribution is designed to be interoperable with the Switchboard components. So if you're using Switchboard to match, to overlap, to certify data, you can automatically go on to this distribution step through Datavant without having to go through the additional work of setting up a separate way to send and receive any connected data. Now Mark is going to talk through some instances in which we can see the power of the Datavant Switchboard in action.
Great, thanks, Salma. Okay, let's jump on here. Yeah, we're gonna work through a couple case studies for how these components could be used. So let's jump on. Great, so in this first example here, we're looking at a reasonably straightforward case where we want to overlap two different data sets. So we have a clinical trial sponsor that has data captured in a clinical trial setting. They've tokenized that data, and then they're looking to enhance their understanding of those patients for potentially a range of use cases, adverse event tracking, ongoing surveillance, and other uses. And they want to find out what other third parties may have data on these particular 1,000, 2,000 patients or whatever they might have in their clinical trial. So both parties tokenize the data, upload it securely to Datavant. They're able to provision an overlap between just those two data sets, and they're able to get the overlap counts. And then the last step here in distribute means is that they could actually export the overlapping tokens and say, well, of the 2,000 patients, this other real world data provider, this claims source, has data on 700 of these 2,000 patients enrolled in the trial. And maybe I want to learn a little bit more about those 700. Is there a bias in the types of patients that they have data on? We can do an export, distribute those tokens back, of course, with permission from both sides. And then they're able to do additional assessment on those tokens. So that's kind of a warming up use case here for Switchboard, putting a couple of components in action. Tokenize the data, run an overlap, distribute the overlapping tokens back for additional assessment to understand whether this linkage has value and what type of value. So let's jump on. I think we've got another example here, a little bit more going on here. So this one was inspired by real use case in the COVID-19 research database, which is a pro bono initiative that Datavant and a number of organizations and our customers were a part of starting in April of last year. And what we're looking at here is a use case where the certification component is of particular value. So in this case, to do an assessment of, let's say, COVID and its correlations with diabetes or obesity, you may want to look at a number of different factors. You may want to look at a claims data source, try to understand who's been diagnosed. You may want consumer data to understand demographics about those patients, and you may want mortality data to be able to understand survival rates. And so we want to combine all those data sets together. Now, of course, mortality data has some re-identification risk if you're able to know the exact dates of death. Consumer data, of course, has some re-identification risk depending on the granularity of the demographic information or the lifestyle attributes or other things like that. And claims data has some re-identification risk. So the question is, when you're bringing these data sets together, even if they're independently very small risk and meet that HIPAA threshold, how do we ensure that the linkage also meets that? And one way to do that is to use the Datavant's certification component. And in this case, we would bring in both data sets. We've certified the process of assessing these data sets to ensure that the process itself remains low risk for all the data sets. Run a statistical assessment via a third-party certifier. Typically, we work with Mirador Analytics, although we are comfortable to work with a certifier of your choice if you have a preference. We then do the assessment, generate the certification. We would share that with you or the research organization that's doing this study. And so if there are important variables in the study to you, for example, if you're looking at age and you want to make sure that you're able to know the age down to a very granular level, we can work with you to make sure that that's in the certification, and there might be trade-offs that are made around that. Once those decisions get locked, as Serena was saying, our platform actually will implement those redactions. And that's where often a lot of the work for you or your IT teams lives, and also where a lot of the risk lives, is making sure that you do those redactions correctly. So the example Serena gave with a zip3, they might say it needs to be a zip3 unless it's one of these zip3s, in which case remove it and make sure that it's not a Canadian code. And so you need to make sure that you're meeting all of those things. And by using our platform, we're able to make sure that that all happens together. So all the redactions get put in place, and then those combined data sets can then get distributed to, in this case, research database or an analytics partner, or back to you in your environment, wherever you designate it. So that's a little bit more going on there, using the certification component as one of the key value adds to enable this type of research. We'll jump on to, I think we have one more example here. Yeah, so in this last example, this is we're imagining that we're trying to understand the effectiveness of a medical device. So we have what we call first-party device data. So you know the patients that are using your device, and you have data about their usage, you have their PI, you're able to tokenize that data. You then want to combine that with additional data. Let's say that some of the outcomes or the improvements are measured in lab results. So you want to combine that with a lab data source. And then additionally, you want to bring in claims data to understand additional diagnoses or history to fill out the picture or the full journey for the patients that are using your device. And ultimately, what you're trying to do is run an analysis for the effectiveness of your device. So what you can do here is you can tokenize your first-party data, run an overlap with the lab data set. And we've actually seen this happen where then the organization will license the lab data, but only license the lab data for patients that are in their first-party data set. And what the Datavant Switchboard is able to do is it's able to take a look at that lab data, find those patients that are in the first-party data set, and then only segment and distribute those records out so that you're getting a subset of those records that you've licensed, which is your first-party data. And then obviously might be a subset. You might have thousands of patients using your device, and there might be whatever percent are in that lab data set. Just those records will be pulled out through that overlap. And then, like in the last example, the combination of the first-party data, the lab data, the claims data can all be hosted on the Datavant Switchboard here, can be certified, remediated, and then distributed back to you or to an analytics partner. So that's an additional.
I think we might have lost Mark. Can others hear Mark coming through?
No.
Okay, sorry everyone, technical difficulties. I think Mark's internet might have dropped. That is okay, hopefully we'll get him back soon. That kind of rounds out the overview of examples of Datavant Switchboard in action. Just covering one more point here before we get into questions and open it up for anyone to ask our product experts any questions on the specific switchboard components. We did just want to point out, if anyone's curious, how do you actually get access to the switchboard? How do you get started? It's pretty straightforward. Talk to your Datavant account team to learn how to take advantage of any switchboard components that you're not already using. And again, to reiterate, all these components are interoperable with each other. So if you want to, say, add a certification, or you want to add matching solutions on top of what you're already doing with Datavant, you can absolutely do that. Just reach out again to your Datavant representative and they'll take care of that for you. So that takes us to the finish. Just to recap again, we kind of talked about this in the beginning, but Datavant Switchboard describes Datavant's full product capabilities, managing connectivity end-to-end for you, from the process of tokenizing your data and finding partners, understanding the overlap across partners and data sets, to fulfilling data partnerships, connecting data sets, getting them certified, and then distributing them on to the end client. So at this point, we'll open it up for questions. And it looks like we have Mark back. Hey, Mark.
Yeah, so there's never a good time for your internet to totally go down up there. So I'm connected through my phone's Wi-Fi hotspot. So if you're having issues hearing me, let me know and I'll pass questions to the rest of the folks. And apologies for those in the audience if I suddenly.
All good. I think everyone can relate to internet dropping at the worst possible time. All right, so yeah, we'll open it up for questions at this point. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. me just open that up here. So feel free to just submit any questions that you have on any of the specific switchboard components. All of us will be here to answer your questions. So maybe we can take this first one on certification. So the question is, which certifiers do you work with for certification? So Serena, maybe you can take that one.
Yeah, definitely. So like I think I said maybe earlier, we're happy to work with any certifier that you work with. We have a managed certification platform where we enable certifiers to come in, look at the data, and then we apply the redactions. We partner today with Mirador specifically. So if you don't have a certifier you're working with, we recommend using them, and we can bring them in and they're familiar with all of our systems and can help you get an expert determination on your single data set or joint data set.
Thanks, Serena. How about this next one? Does using Datavant Switchboard require me to send PHI to Datavant?
Yeah, I could take that one. I think that's related to tokenization. So short answer, no. Sort of the default and standard workflow would be that you'd install our software, you would tokenize and de-identify the data directly in your environment, and then you'd upload a de-identified data set into Datavant's environment. And then from there, you can overlap, certify that with other data sets, match the data sets, distribute the data sets. But the PHI is not required to come to us. That is an option. Again, if you don't want to install the software, you can do that. And we can sign a business associate agreement. We can receive that data in a separate, secure environment. So certainly an option, not a requirement, and in fact, not typical for us to receive PHI. So thanks for the question.
It looks like we have a question on server mode. Can you please re-review what Datavant server mode means?
Yeah, okay, cool. Another good question. So server mode is a way to run the core command line application in sort of a persistent listening mode on a local server or a local IP address. And so what ends up happening by default is you run the application and it will start running on local host, and then you can make an API call over a port, and we can show you the documentation. And you can make an API call that says, hey, here's my record. You hit that API and it will actually tokenize the record, or you can link the record. And so what it enables is basically an API-like interface. And so for the developers out there, hopefully REST API makes sense. You interact with our software through a REST API. And to be clear, this is all happening locally. So your data in server mode doesn't need to come to Datavant. There's no business associate agreement required. It's just a different way to interact rather than sending what's more typical, which is flat files through. So if you're working with JSON, or you're working with individual records, server mode can be a helpful way to work. And our product success team would be happy to share documentation. And the final point is, again, not a different piece of software. Same software you're working with today for command line, run in a different mode, enables that persistent listening on server mode. So hopefully that answers the question. If it doesn't, send a note to us through the Q&A, and we'll follow up with you afterward to make sure that you get all the info and set up on that.
Great, thanks, Mark. Let's take this next one. How can I find patients with a certain disease or condition and figure out if they're in my data set or a partner's data set?
Yeah, I can take this one. So within our ecosystem, sources can surface data sets and the associated metadata regarding the nature of the data set. This includes patient diseases, conditions, diagnoses, etc. Sources can surface these data sets in a manner either on demand or by request, which is essentially enabling the data set to be visible in their partner profile page and within the overlap pages. So if you're looking for a certain disease or condition cohort, you as a buyer can then discover those data sets that have been listed on partner profile pages or on the overlap page and generate an overlap on these data sets to assess the extent that these records may overlap with your own data set.
Great. Thanks, Chris. All right, so this next question.
Actually,
going back-
Joyce, maybe I can add one
Okay.
additional comment on that. To Chris says that's great. I will also say if you can export the tokens, or if you want to export the tokens, then you can do even more complex additional analysis in your own environment. So we have a great tool set, we think, but if there's additional stuff you want to do, you can export those tokens and do additional analysis as well.
Great, thanks, Mark. This next question, going back to the topic of certification. Does your certification solution use a pre-certified data model?
Yeah, it's a good question. So our certification, our managed certification platform enables you to get a custom certification done on any data set. And when writing those certifications, experts are relying on previous knowledge from looking at similar looking data sets and similar use cases. But each certification written is bespoke for your data set, or multiple data sets if you're getting a multi-data set certification. Datavant additionally has some pre-certified data models. One of them that's the most common is our common profile model, which we enable any client to use, and they can basically upload their tokens and some common data elements to our cloud for easy overlaps with other clients.
Great, thanks, Serena. We have a question here. I think this would be related to distribution. Do we need to send files to partner sites through SFTP? Salma, do you want to take that?
I was just unmuting myself. Yeah, so you don't necessarily need to send, if I'm understanding the question properly, you don't need to send it through to the partner's SFTP site, but in order to utilize our distribution offering, you do need to follow the standard Datavant practices of data onboarding, which require a partner to drop their data set to our secure hosted SFTP.
Great, that helps. Let's see, maybe we can just take, I'm just doing a quick time check. We'll just take a couple more questions here. How is match different from overlaps? It seems like an overlap would require matching.
I can take that question as well. Yeah, so overlaps really compare token values to determine if they are the same person or not. So this is really simple and really easy and useful to use for data discovery and exploration across your data sets and partner data sets like Chris was talking about. Match, on the other hand, relies on a statistical model as well as training data to inform whether or not two patients match. And based off of that determination, assigns them either the same or different Datavant IDs. So definitely understand the question, pretty nuanced difference between the two, but important difference for the use cases that they're used for.
Great, and then maybe this last question we'll just kind of squeeze in here. I think this would also go to Salma. Is it possible to deliver or distribute only certain segments of patients based on criteria? For example, a geographic area or disease state?
Yeah, a really good question. So we have a segmentation tool at Datavant. We call it the Segment Builder, and that enables you to actually create different filters, if you will, of patients. Some people might call it cohorting. We call it segmentation. And based off of that different filtering criteria, you can then set up that segment to deliver to data recipients. So whether you say, I want to create a segment that has females in California, you can do that, and then you can set that segment up to deliver on to end recipients. Maybe from the larger, broader underlying data set, you say like, okay, now I want to actually create a segment based off of that is a certain sex of people who exhibit a diagnosis. You can still use the segmentation tool that we have to create a new segment and set that up to deliver to the same or different recipients.
All right, awesome. Well, I think we're just about at time. So just wanted to thank everyone for attending today's session. We will make the recording available to everyone who registered. So if you want to review that or send it out to your colleagues, you can feel free to do that. And yeah, do feel free to reach out to us if you have any feedback or suggestions on other topics that you'd like to hear from us on, and learn more about Switchboard related to the different capabilities, we'd be happy to follow up with you one-on-one. So thanks everyone again for your time and attention today. And thanks for sending in all your questions.